Hey guys, Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. In today's video of author tips, we are going to be talking about an author tip that I've never really heard anyone discuss. For anyone who is aware of one of the most important tasks of an author, it is to create the world that your characters live in. Oftentimes, previously I've talked about how playing Minecraft is a good way to build the world that you want to have your characters live in. There's other things that you can use to help create these worlds. But it's odd that no one has ever, at least that I've seen, has discussed the idea of learning a second language, which is kind of an odd thing. Obviously, there are a lot of times where in school you're going to be told you need to learn a second language and blah 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 blah. And honestly, yes, it is required for a lot of majors in college to know a second language of some sort. But it's odd that nobody as an author talks about it. For an author, the reason for learning a second language isn't actually specifically the idea of actually knowing another language, but rather to understand the idea behind the language. Basically, what you're doing when you're taking a second language as a writer is that you want to look for for different things in the culture. Your main task as a writer is to learn about the culture of another person, another country, or another whatever. One of the reasons why I learned Spanish was because of the fact that it was kind of required for a lot of colleges to learn a second language. So I just prepared and took Spanish as my second language. But then later on, I realized the important significance of it, because as an author, you need to create the world that your characters are going to be living in, and designing the culture of that world is actually one of the hardest things to do if you only know your own culture. Basically, yes, there are a lot of cultures in the world, and whether you believe it or not, they are all very different from each other. A single world can have countless cultures within it, and that's an important thing to understand as you're writing your stories. Well, yes, you can create a culture that is amazing without knowing a second language. It's actually something that surprisingly does a lot of good for an author. Obviously, there are a lot of people who will take from Tolkien and other authors when designing the cultures for their different races, but the simple fact of the matter is that the reason that Tolkien was able to create these cultures is because of the fact that he knew a lot of languages. I think that I don't know the exact thing, but he was actually looking into a lot of languages. One of the reasons why he has so many languages that he's created for his books. But the simple fact of the matter is that is extremely helpful when creating a culture, because now that you understand these different cultures as you're learning the language, you also will be able to understand your own culture even more, meaning that you can build off of all of these cultures to create a new culture that is entirely your own. Let me give some examples. In my books, I've explained a few things in my series Book Culture, one of which that's coming up is who is Zonderli Kunderik. And Zonderli Kunderik was an awful person, obviously. Which is an important thing to understand as to why that became a curse word in my language. But on top of that, there's also other words like the word "lk," which I will be going into more detail eventually, but not right now. But the word "lk" doesn't actually mean death like you might expect it to. Even though its direct translation would be death, what they actually mean by it is the idea of going on to the next life. Because of the fact that in their culture, they know that they will be going into another life. Not here in our universe, but in heaven or in hell. And they know that. So they don't really feel like they need to worry about the life that they're currently in, which is why the only reason that people cry at all when people die in that universe is because they're going to miss their friends for a short time, but they know that eventually they will get to see them again. And that's why they don't worry too much about death in the books. Like, obviously, the main characters do worry about death at the beginning of the books, but as you continue on the story, you'll see that a lot of these characters really don't care that much about death. Like, eventually you guys are going to meet a character named Serena Angelade, and a character that's very important to her does die in the book. But unlike the characters in the first Jinx Adventures, she's not super emotional. Even though he sacrificed himself for her eventually, which I'm not going to go into all the details for obvious reasons, the simple fact of the matter is that she's not as worried. She knows that one day she'll see him again. And it doesn't bother her as much as, say, the deaths in the first book matter to the other characters. So, yeah, that's just something to at least think about for that book. And that's just an example from my own books. But there are obviously some other things to keep in mind. And obviously there's a lot of different cultures within our own society. There's a Christian culture, there's an atheist culture, there's one for almost every single religion, let's be honest. Even different cultures within our own religions. Just one group of Christians is completely different from the others. It's a simple fact of the matter. While yes, many of these things have significance, each one is different. Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, it's not a day of mourning, it's a day of celebration, to celebrate those who have passed and to celebrate their lives. And honestly, I think that is amazing. And again, there are a lot of other things like that throughout any culture. And learning about these different cultures is one of the most helpful things that you'll actually see. Because even if you don't understand things perfectly, it's one of the greatest things that you can do. Another thing that is similar to the idea of learning a second language is to read a lot of books, which is a common tip that authors will often give to each other. Read a lot of other books, and you're learning about the world that these other authors have built. But by learning about the different cultures, you can help yourself to understand a little bit more about maybe where these different stories came about. And that's honestly an amazing part of why I love these books and why I love being an author and learning these other languages. So, yeah. If you guys are going to learn another language, then I do suggest it, especially if you're planning on becoming an author of any sort. I would even suggest it if you're doing anything that is art related, because you get to learn a lot about the different world. So, yeah. But anyways, guys, if you have any author tips, then definitely leave them down in the comments below. And also, if you have any questions about writing, then please please ask them down in the comments down below, of course. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you're new, please subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we do a lot of videos like this, along with theories for several different series. But anyways, guys, I have been Electro Ninja, and I will see you guys next time. But on!